What is up, everybody? Welcome back to the Twilight Imperium Junkies podcast. This is Henry.
And this is Rand.
And today we have a topic near and dear to my heart. We are going to be talking all about Custodians, its place in your journey to 10 points, paths to scoring it, factions that are good at it. We are excited to get into it. But first, early signups for our Alliances tournament are now over. There's just one spot left, which will probably go pretty quickly. But if you are still interested in Alliances and have availability on one of the game dates, please feel free to throw your hat in the ring as a backup player for any of those games. And hey, you never know, you could wind up an Alliance tournament champion. Also, don't forget that the final game for our online tournament, Stooge for the Throne 2, is happening this Saturday at 3 p.m. Pacific time. Will we see a junkie claim the title of Stooge Master? Come tune in, hang out, it's going to be a fun stream and an epic game. Then we'll roll right into Game 1 of the Alliances tournament the following weekend. Lots of TI to satisfy our junkie cravings.
So, now we're going to talk about today's podcast topic, Custodians, which was the winner of last month's Patreon poll.
Thank you, patrons, for picking this topic, because I love Custodians.
You love Custodians so much, in fact, that it can sometimes be your downfall, Henry.
That is true. We will get into that. Fun fact, though, I actually took Custodians in the very first TI Junkies episode that was ever released.
You are the canon Custodian.
Yeah, since the beginning, since the pilot. And actually, after taking a look at the games that we've documented on the YouTube, I have taken Custodes roughly a third of the time I have participated in games on the channel, which, if you ask me, is pretty good.
A third of the time is a lot.
It's more than I win, so. And for those of you out there listening, do let us know in the comments or the Discord, what is the Custodians vibe at your table? Do you score Custodians a lot? Does someone at your table score Custodians a lot? Does it generate a lot of heat? And what factions seem to do the best at scoring Custodians in your group? Now, Rand, while I don't think we could classify you as a Custodians junkie specifically, I was thinking about it, and I actually do see your love of Schmecketal points and the Winu, including your recent win in your tournament game. Congrats again. Kind of puts you in a Custodians adjacent camp, because I see these Mechatol related points as mechanics that allow you to start scoring in a way that makes the rest of the table trepidatious. And these are often also both reasons why the table might engage in the Malachi crunch.
I don't actually see a big difference between Custodians and Imperial points. I think one of the key differences is Custodians happens before any Imperial points, so there's more time to shake that heat off, as opposed to in later games when people have a stronger plastic presence and are able to actually police you for getting those quote-unquote bonus points.
Yeah, that's true. It's more likely that you'll see someone preemptively try and somehow slay your Imperial point than, I don't know, send a ship into Mechatol to block your Custodians, for example.
Right, exactly, while effectively those two moves accomplish the same thing.
Interesting.
Henry, I want to ask you, what is it about Custodians specifically that you love?
Oh man, where to begin with my sweet Custodes? The big headline reason, which I'm sure I share with many other players out there, is that this is a nice guac, a nice bonus point, a nice 10th point that you just can get taken care of at the beginning of the game. I feel like so often in TI, we're sort of calculating our path. There's this background process going in your brain the whole game of, oh, okay, well, where's my 10th point going to come from? Oh my God, if I can score that, yeah, but I still need my bonus point. I still need my guac. That sort of whirs louder and louder as each round passes. But in games where I manage to get Custodians, maybe for better or for worse, I breathe a nice sigh of relief. I feel like I can just lean back and just play the game, have more fun. On some level, I feel like if I just really let the game unfold and keep my tempo, I will be in contention for the win.
Right, it's like pretty much autopilot at that point.
You know, I don't think of it like that, but maybe you're right. I'm just looking for a way for TI to be on autopilot. But once I started thinking about Custodes and breaking it down, I realized there's also something satisfying about it, which is that it can sort of represent, at the very least, one aspect of your game really coming online. So maybe it's your tech game, maybe it's your speaker positioning, maybe it's some good deals you made in order to get that influence. And TI is such a marathon and it's such a game of endurance that just having that extra pizzazz in your step in round one, I feel like can just make a difference in your mentality for, the next 8 hours.
Totally. It is like a morale boost, really.
Play it on yourself
Yeah.
in real life.
I love the feeling of getting bonus points. Henry, I actually heard this phrase from you first, which is no beans, no rice, all guac. It's when you just, are not doing well at scoring any objectives or any secrets, but your bonus points, your agenda points, your relic points on fire.
They can take away your planets, but they can't take away your guac.
Not at all. The most amount of bonus points I've gotten in one game is 5. Do you know how amazing it feels? For half your path to victory, coming from Mechatol and agendas like Seed and Mutiny, I had scored 0 secrets that game. 0 secrets! And I ended it at 9, which
That's
is
nice.
wild. It was really nice, really fun, and I just love outlier games like that. Some games you're like, oh no, how do I get a single bonus point? And other games you're like, oh no, how do I get an objective?
How do I get a single objective? We are going to talk about factions, some strat cards, all that good stuff. But if there's one guiding principle I want to offer here, maybe to any aspiring custodian junkies, it can really all be boiled down to how do you get to Schmeckatal and how do you pay for it? Just like maybe we start doing the math of our 10th victory point, we want to be doing our math on just how to get to that 6th influence. That's all we need. We don't need 7 influence. We don't even need 8 influence. And I think you can really surprise yourself if you're vigilant about what you have access to, awareness of the conditions and possibilities of getting that 6th influence. But let's talk about factions. Rand, do you have a favorite Custodians faction or who comes to mind for you as an iconic Custodians faction?
I mean, of course, for me, it's the Winnu. One of their 2 faction abilities is to take Custodians for free. And the other faction ability is to pop down a couple of structures when you do get Mechatol. So, I mean, that nothing is ushering you towards getting Schmechatol more than just playing the Winnu. They were literally, truly born for it.
A Rand with Winnu taking Custodes is a very happy Rand indeed.
My game could end there and I'd be satisfied, honestly, Some people need to get to 10 points. I need to get to 1 if it's Custodians.
So, I mean, at the end of the day, the right cards, the right strat card timing, the right gravity rift, I think we can agree that any faction can end up with Custodes under the right conditions. But there are a few factions that we might see score Custodians a little more often than others.
Absolutely.
I want to throw Jolnar out there. I want to throw Clan of Sar out there. I want to throw Mahakt out there.
Nalu?
Definitely Nalu. Some other high mobility factions like Argent Flight, Titans have their opportunities to claim Custodians as well. It's really bread and butter TI, but a good place to start is just who are the blue tech factions. Anyone that starts with or can start with a blue tech is just going to be 1 step closer to Grav Drive, which means they are 1 step closer to Schmechatol. One of those, Sar, for me, I think might have the single best kit overall for grabbing Custodians. They have that blue tech start. They have that agent that boosts their movement. They get trade goods as they take planets, so they don't even have to be worrying about making deals to start racking up enough money to pay for Custodians.
It is very scary to be facing a SAR that has a good chunk of planets adjacent to their home system because, like you said, Henry, those trade goods rack up and it takes much less finagling to get that last step of Custodians. Honestly, it makes me think that trade players should not refresh SAR round 1 just because if they are just 1 or 2 trade goods short, that's just a huge deal in terms of the shape of the game.
I could totally see that, because just an X-1 and wash, which a lot of players might take for granted, could easily put SAR over the 6 influence they need, and with their mobility, it's right there.
Other factions you mentioned that are good at taking Custodians tend to get there with Cruiser 2. You mentioned Jolnar and Mahakt, who under the right tech pop conditions can get the mobility to fly all the way from their home system straight to Mechatol. So those are 2 other factions you need to look out for in round 1.
Yeah, Mahakt starting with biostims can be really nice.
And their home planet being a 5 influence one certainly doesn't hurt.
Yeah, I've seen Mahakt just grab trade, grab a red skip, biostims it immediately. All of a sudden they got Cruiser 2, they're soaring right to Schmechatol. I do want to mention Jolnar for a second. Obviously we can see them just do a gravity drive carrier 2 and they can already get all the way to Mechatol. I've also seen some funny things where Jolnar takes trade, researches Cruiser 2, and also researches transit diodes custodians, so they just move some infantry that they initially used to take planets in their slice back home and then fly their cruiser all the way to Mechatol.
Actually, Henry, in last year's Stooge for the Throne final, you took Custodians as Jolnar.
That's true. I did a little cruiser 2 move. I left my slice probably a little too open, but hey, I got Custodes, and guess what? For today's episode, that's all that matters. I took Custodes, which means I won the final. Not actually true.
This year, you actually managed to grab Custodians in your Stooge for the Throne game, so it seems to be a recurring theme for you.
And at that Zulus tournament we went to in Washington last year, in both my round 1 game and the final, I played as Empyrean and I took Custodians.
You seem to find a very reliable path to Custodians when you play Empyrean. How does that happen? What is it about them?
I think if you are looking to become a Custodians junkie, Empyrean is a really great and straightforward faction to do it. We start with the blue tech, which we already established is nice. We have 4 influence at home. We're already 2/3 of the way there. We also are a 4 commodity faction, so whenever that trade pop happens, we're going to be on the richer end of the table. Bonus money if we manage to get Dark Pact out there early enough. And then also starting with DET. We can explore those frontier tokens to get a bonus trade good, get a couple command tokens. We can even find Mirage, which comes to us readied and worth 2 influence. So really, if you're Empyrean, you have Warfare, you're able to follow Tech, maybe Diplo, you're basically guaranteed Custodians. If you have a Rift and you take Trade, you're subject to the whims of the Rift, but provided you can make it through there, you're basically guaranteed. I think it's just a great faction to make taking Custodians your bread and butter.
Let's take a second to talk about a very unconventional faction that has some sneaky paths to getting Custodian. The Ghosts of Creus. And we actually got to see Kyle K. Ruthless, another finalist from this year's upcoming Stooge for the Throne final, score Custodians in round 1 of the TI Junkies game he was in.
Season 3, Episode 10.
By getting someone to place a wormhole token via the IFF in Mechatol. And by someone, I mean a stooge.
It might have been Matt. It might have been Rand.
And the best part was it was kind of sold as like a way to help us intimidate the council by giving us more options for adjacency to Mechatol. But that really worked out for Kyle.
Yeah, it was really tragic. I did go for Custodians as Empyrean in that game, but I died in the Grav Rift, and Kyle was able to grab it, so good for Kyle.
So once there's a wormhole on Mechatol, there's 2 ways the ghosts could get there. One is via their agent, if they haven't used it to take Malice, for example. But another is to build a mech at home off of Warfare, and then use that mech ability to place a different wormhole in their home system, and thanks to quantum entanglement, those wormholes are adjacent, and they can just skedaddle right on over to Mechatol, and in this case, intimidate the council right from their home system.
Yeah, talking about that one makes me salty all over again. Ooh. We could give a shout out to the Emirates of Hakan real quickly. They start out with anti-mass so they can get gravity drive. They also just have so many commodities, and because they don't have to worry about being neighbors to get those washed and make some deals, with a tech pick or a warfare pick, they're going to be in a good position to grab Custodes as well.
And the last faction I'd like to talk about here is Nalu. And what I love about Nalu when it comes to Custodians is that if no one manages to get it round 1, it is basically a guarantee for Nalu. Round 2, no matter their speaker order. And that's kind of nice. You don't gotta think about the politics game when it comes to taking Custodians.
That is really nice. I need to play Nalu more often, honestly. Quick shout out to NRA. AI Dev makes Cruiser 2 really easy. There are some factions that I would say struggle to score Custodians. We don't need to dive deep into all of them, but I will, because I'm playing L1 in an async game right now where I did take Custodians. I will nominate L1 for being one of the worst Custodian factions. They have 0 influence at home. They're a 2 commodity faction. They start with a green and a red tech. They start with no ships with a move value of 2. So you're even more so at the mercy of your neighbors for a transaction eligibility. They have an agent that maybe I'll be able to sell. Maybe. And really the only thing I can count on once I have a neighbor is getting my promissory note sold for $2.
And round 1, probably $1, because everyone's all stingy and stuff.
People are stingy. So that is an uphill climb. I will also just say my beloved Xcha. There's so much I love about playing Xcha, and I've played them in so many TI Junkies episodes. They are also not the strongest Custodians faction. But of course, I still love these factions. They make up for it in all sorts of other ways. But before we move on, Rand, I want to paint you a picture. Just close your eyes for me for a moment.
All right, I'm listening.
You're playing Council Caleris. You pick the Xcha home system or the Argent home, either will work. One of the other players is Ghosts of Creus, so Grav Drive is an option for your starting technology. There's a gravity rift in your slice. At the start of the strategy phase, you gain a trade good and replenish your commodities because that's Caleris stuff. Do you see where I'm going with this?
I see it and I love it.
You could, for your very first move of the game, with Grav Drive, with the Grav Rift, with your influence at home and your commodities that maybe you spent with your agent, take Custodians. First move of the game.
I didn't even know that this was possible in anything but Franken. I am now waiting for this scenario to play out in front of me.
Bonus points if you take leadership, because then you could have a game where the very first action of the entire game is someone taking Custodians.
And bonus points if you take Imperial, because Council's second action of the game would be getting their second quad.
I didn't even think about that, and of course you thought of taking Imperial round one.
Which kind of leads us to a couple of our other points that we want to get to in this episode, which is gravity rifts.
Yeah, gravity rifts. They are a fickle friend, aren't they? I mean, I think you're very well acquainted with gravity rifts, Rand.
Look, here's the truth. If there's a rift on the way to Mechatol, I'm gonna take the rift. I'm gonna rift it, and I will likely die. It happens a lot. But when it doesn't, oh boy, is it nice. And in this here's Stooge for the Throne game, the Rift and I had a little tango, but it ended up really working for me. Round 1, Rift said, no Winu, no Custodians for you. Round 2, Rift said, Custodians for you, and good thing you took Imperial, because no one else can even get to Mechatol on their first turn.
It was really just a Winu dream.
It couldn't have been any better than that.
And it was just such a Rand move to go for the Rift round 1, die, and then round 2 just be like, well, what else am I going to do today other than go for Custodes again?
Very true. The only other faction that I can think of that really has the opportunity to do that double scoring in a round of Custodians and then an Imperial point is Nalu. Because like we touched on earlier, if we get to round 2 and they're getting Custodians, they might as well take it on the 8. But I know a lot of Nalu players are actually very afraid of this tactic because Nalu already comes with an inherent amount of heat, and 2 bonus points just doesn't help their case with that. But if I'm Nalu, personally, me, Rand, I am not gonna not have my fun. I am gonna go for it.
Yeah, we're going to circle back to Custodes and table heat in just a little bit. But for a moment, let's talk about strat cards. Before we kind of talk about which strat cards are going to be most useful for getting Custodians round 1, I think we could maybe call Politics the most useful strategy card for getting Custodians overall. Because if you look around the table and it doesn't look like anyone is capable of getting to Mechatol or everyone is too preoccupied with scoring their public objectives, you just take Politics round 1, get your Grav Drive or whatever you need, and then round 2, you take Leadership and Custodians is now your stooge.
That does seem to be the most surefire way of getting Custodians if you don't have one of those heavy Custodians hitters in the game.
But then when it comes to round 1, what are we really looking for? We're looking for Diplo, we're looking for trade, we're looking for warfare, we're looking for tech. Depending on your board state, your faction, and thinking back to our guiding principles of how do you get there and how do you pay for it, you can kind of see these 4 strat cards split cleanly into Diplo and trade, which are the cards concerning how you're going to pay for it, and warfare and tech, which are the strat cards that are going to be answering the question of how do you get there.
So ironically, the how you pay for it strat cards, Diplo and trade, you're better off if your stooge takes those cards. Because following the secondary of Diplo is kind of just as good as doing the primary for purposes of getting Custodians. And if you can get a really good trade deal, and that's really all you need to bridge that final gap of paying for Custodians, then you also don't need to be the primary trade holder.
I think that's a really good point. Those are moments where it's really helpful to have a beat on your table vibe. There are those players, when it comes time for them to pick a strategy card, they see Diplo, they get excited about starving the table out of refreshing their planets round 1.
And there are also players, like yours truly, who don't always give people a refresh on trade round 1 because that's a lot of value for some future debt, y'all. Round 1 money goes a long way. It builds plastic, it researches tech, it gets you Custodians, whereas without that money, everyone's hosed.
That is truly classic Rand TI philosophy. Dodging the refresh round 1 because just in proportion to how much money and resources you'll have later in the game, It's just such high value round one.
Trade good round one goes so far. So far.
It could be the difference between whether or not you get custodians. One trade good.
Absolutely. And it's hard when you're doing your round one shenanigans to be really keeping tabs of how much people might need or who you should or shouldn't refresh. And it's a very autopilot thing to do, to just let everyone get their money and you'll get some value out of it without really calculating the repercussions of what the value you're giving them will cost you by endgame.
So we're talking about paying for custodians. Earlier we mentioned Mahakt having 5 influence at home. We mentioned Empyrean having 4 influence at home. We mentioned Trade and Diplo, which maybe you pick, maybe you follow. Those are going to be key for getting to that 6th influence. Whether or not you're a 3 or 4 commodity faction, again, can be the deciding factor if you have that extra buck.
So let's talk about some alternate ways of finding money. Aside from the trade strategy card and finding a neighbor to wash with, there's exploration and DET. So industrial planets are the ones that give you commodities, and hazardous planets let you kill infantry in exchange for trade goods. The industrial ones could also help you convert commodities into trade goods, but hopefully you have a neighbor stooge who will wash and help with that, so you could max value and get 2 commodities instead.
Not just a neighbor stooge, everybody. Be very careful that you don't have just a normal vanilla neighbor. You need a neighbor stooge. So you might end up picking up a buck or 2 that way.
Hazardous planets also sometimes let you refresh the card, and if you have Mir or something highly influential, that's just a gold mine for an early Custodians grab.
Yeah, 6 of the 20 cards in the Hazardous Exploration deck are going to either give you a trade good in exchange for your infantry, or if you have a mech, you'll just get the trade good, or ready the planet. So while on average, hazardous planets actually have less influence, cultural planets on average have the most influence, the trade goods and refresh potential I have found plays more into my Custodians game than just the raw influence of cultural planets. Even beyond those 6 trade good or ready related hazardous exploration cards, 3 of them get you a command token, which at first glance isn't necessarily going to get you Custodians, but maybe it means it gives you flexibility on strat card timing if you just need to burn a token and stall so that someone will pop the card you need to get Custodians. But also, maybe you find yourself in a particular position where your path to Custodians is actually dependent on you following Diplo, following Warfare, and following Technology. In which case, finding a command token off of a Hazardous Explorer, again, could be the difference.
Right, and the stalling thing you mentioned is kind of what happened in your tournament game this year.
Yeah, that's right. I did actually get a token off of an Explorer and just burned one while I waited for Diplo to pop so that I could refresh what I needed to have that 6 influence.
And the last thing about exploration is DET, which, like you mentioned earlier, is a great avenue for Empyrean specifically because they don't have to research that tech and they're sending their destroyers to empties regardless. But also it's possible for the tech holder to research DET and gravity drive off one pop, in which case the DET might be what brings up some surprise cash that can lead to Custodians.
Very handy after that big 6 resource spend on double tech.
Absolutely.
It's also a long shot, but occasionally off DET, you draw 2 action cards, and hey, you have a 1 in 15 chance of getting a flank speed off of that Frontier token.
I would take those odds.
Really not bad.
Follow politics and just double your chances there. Really drawing a flank speed makes any faction a Custodians faction, because that does eliminate step 1 of the 2 steps. How do I get there? How do I pay for it?
Flank speeds are super clutch. If only we could rely on them every game. So we started talking about neighbors, we started talking about making deals. There's another element to getting custodes, which is playing the meta of your table, being scrappy, finding every possible avenue to scrape by with that last influence you need. I remember this one game, I was playing as Sardak and had managed to secure a deal for research agreement, so I ended up getting Gravity Drive. I had Warfare, so I was going to be able to unlock my stuff. And I activated Mechatol Rex when I didn't actually have all of the influence necessary to score Custodians. I moved my ship in and had some new neighbors with whom I could negotiate a deal in order to score. Now you might be wondering, why would they just give me a deal when I'm obviously about to score Custodians? Wouldn't they be tempted to hose me? Isn't that way too seductive of an option? But it had become clear that it was either going to be me, the Sardak player, or the Jolnar player, and it became a pretty easy sell once the table could see that, well, we would much rather have Sardak, a faction we think of as being kind of weak, scoring this bonus point right now, than Jolnar, one of the best factions from scoring this bonus point right now.
I just have to point out how swaggy it is for Sardak, no-tech Sardak, to pick up Gravity Drive from Jolnar, nonetheless, only to snipe Custodians from them by appealing to the nature of the rest of the table, while already dangling from the cliff with no safety net to fall on.
I will say Jolnar was not thrilled about that, and they did attempt to outbid me a little bit in these deals, but I think it became clear rather quickly that the will of the table was not to give Jolnar the Custodians point.
It is really nice in a TI game when the table can see where the threat management really needs to go. And while it might have been tempting to hose you in that moment because, wow, you're really risking a lot, good on those players for seeing that the alternative was creating a monster that would be even harder for them to stop in the future.
Well, I agree with that assessment. I could also see a table at which the hosing takes precedent there. And maybe someone would even start to think, hey, you know what? Maybe I like the idea of Sardak getting to Mechatol and having a chance of killing whatever Jolnar sends in to score Custodians. And maybe the hosers end up being the ones that score it instead. It just depends. I think that's really the point, is like you kind of have to suss out the vibe of the table and what moves are going to be well received, what moves are not.
So I actually have a story about being a hoser who manages to snipe Custodians off the ashes of my opponents.
Please tell us.
This was actually a very recent Custodians grab in an ongoing async game. Total War. I'm playing Cabal. Round 1, I've placed the dock adjacent to Mechatol. Round 2, my SAR neighbor grabs leadership, obviously going for Custodians, but I've drawn Experimental Battle Station.
Oh, that's spicy.
And so they activate and they send their ships, and I bring it up as an extortion, like, look, I know this is gonna hose you big time, so just give me something to make it worth it. Give me your ceasefire. It's 14 points. It's Total War. You'll get it back eventually. It's enough of a small boost for me to let you have this point that you picked your strategy card around. They refused to give in to the extort and refused to give any kind of counteroffer. And so I played the Experimental Battle Station and smugly got the 2 hits I needed to stop them from getting Custodians. And on the 4, I had construction that round too. I managed to just activate it and pick up Custodians, a point I had not planned for or anticipated whatsoever in that game.
So what you're saying is, after all our talk of planning and calculating your path to Custodians, you could just get hosed and it goes to Rand instead.
Look, accidents happen, you know? What are we gonna do?
I'm trying to put myself in that SAR player's shoes. I would be a little bit salty about that, but I think in the end I would hand over a ceasefire, especially in a longer game like that one.
Very true. I mean, some people have their principles about what they will or won't give for an extort. Some people say that they'll give nothing for an extort. This was the case. And you know, I can see trying to let the gamble go through because ultimately Experimental Battle Station is a dice roll and that can whiff. So I could see why anyone would take that chance. Even if I wouldn't, because yummy, yummy, juicy Custodians. And also I already spent a token coming here. Oh no.
I love that. Do you have any other memorable Custodian moments you'd like to share with the class, Rand?
I feel like there are a lot, but specifically I'll talk about a combo I was lucky enough to get to experience in Franken, which Franken TI, if you don't know, is building factions with components from all the factions in the game via some complicated draft and playing TI that way.
So basically you could end up playing a quote-unquote faction with the Asaro Agent, the L1 Commander, the Nomad Hero, the Muat Mech, the Winu faction ability. It's just all those pieces of factions jumbled together.
Exactly, and I did get the chance to experience a faction where I did have the Winu Blood Ties, I did have the Ghost Slipstream, and I had either Gravity Drive or the Cabal Space Dock. This combination led to a beautiful round 1, turn 1 Custodians grab, and an even sweeter turn 2 Imperial Pop. How many times am I going to bring up the Custodians into Imperial Pop this podcast? I don't know, it's countless, but clearly it's like the best thing any TI player can experience in their soul. I
do want to give a quick shout out to the slowest Custodians I've ever seen in a 6-player game, which is my current async game where I'm playing as L1. Somehow I just ended up with it like on my 3rd or 4th turn of round 2, I'm pretty sure. To be fair, it's also a Total War and Minor Factions game, so I think people have a slightly different calculus of how much it matters to race to Mechatol. But still, I'm just so used to seeing Custodes get taken by round 2, turn 1 at the latest, that to see it just go unclaimed beyond that was something I hadn't seen in quite a while. So we've talked a lot about how you can get Custodians, But there's another question we have to address. Should you get custodians?
Yes, absolutely, 100% of the time.
I tend to agree with you, but my tournament results beg to differ. I mean, look, in my Stooge for the Throne tournament game, we mentioned that I got a lucky flank speed. I was able to take custodians round 1 as soul, but that was the height of my success in that game. I ended up being left too exposed with neighbors who were willing to go into my slice, while I was truly taking my slice for granted, which is a lesson in TI we will learn over and over again for the rest of our lives, really. And looking back to that game, taking custodians round 1 is what led to the heat really landing on me. And maybe it's not 100% because of custodians, but there seemed to be this kind of domino effect of heat. And other factions at the table, traditionally considered to be bigger heat sinks than Soul, like Clan of Sar and Nalu Collective, kind of skated by. And it might have all been because I made that custodians play.
That very well might be the case. I will also say it could be wise as Winu to sometimes pass on custodians, depending on the table, meta, and vibes around you. I'm not sure I would ever do that, but I could see the case being made of why in the long game for going custodians and maybe saving a Mechatol play for a time when the Winu's a little more stable plastic-wise is a wiser option. It depends on personal playstyle and how much value you put on what other players in a TI game might bring to the table.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen the Winu get the beatdown just for existing, let alone for taking custodians.
And one could say it's a similar case to Nalu. I mean, every single game that Nalu gets custodians, round 2, it's likely that no one's picked Imperial, unless they were planning to go in after Nalu. So the option for Nalu exists way more often than it does for other players to get that double bonus point. And maybe in some cases, foregoing one or both these points can change the result of that game's heat.
What do you think, Rand? Do you think I maybe put too much stock and thought into custodians in my games and might be more successful if I put a little more energy elsewhere?
I don't think so, Henry. I think Custodians is an incredible addition to anyone's game. I think if anything, the danger comes in getting Custodians but also scoring a public that makes it so you're spread too thin. Personally, I would forego scoring a public before I'd forego scoring Custodians because an Imperial grab can help you catch up on publics at any time. An Imperial grab doesn't necessarily give you a bonus point depending on the board state.
You can always catch up on publics. You can't always catch up on custodians. In fact, you can't catch up on custodians at all.
It's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity.
Okay, well, next time I play a game, I take custodians and then end at 5 points, I'll just tell them...
See what you did?
Yeah, I'll take a screenshot of the final score and text it to you and say, see what you did in all caps. And I think that just about does it for this Custodians chat.
I think so. It was a really great choice from the patrons for this month's topic. And our poll is actually out now to vote on a topic for a podcast in August.
And those options are...
Empyrean with Henry.
I love the Empyrean.
We could talk about some flagships.
I also love flagships.
Or When to Betray in TI.
Oh.
Saucy.
That's very saucy. Very saucy, intimate episode, When to Betray.
So get to the polls, log your vote, let us know what you want to hear us chat about soon. And most importantly, don't forget to do the math and how you can get to Mechatol and how you can pay for it in your next TI game.
Yeah, good luck to all of you aspiring custodian junkies. Hope you draw that flank speed.
May the Grav Rift rolls forever be in your favor.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of the Twilight Imperium Junkies podcast.
If you like what we do and want to support the show, check out our Patreon, where amongst other things, you can vote on topics for future episodes.
Keep up with the TI Junkies series by subscribing on YouTube.
Until next time, keep stooging, or maybe don't.
Unless you're my stooge.